A design that is almost a century old and still relevant today. John Moses Browning really knew what he was doing. Way ahead of his time. I love the 1911. Welcome back to Sawtooth Tactical. The 1911 pistol. If you've followed my channel for any period of time, you know that this is my favorite handgun. I absolutely love 1911s. Now, are they still relevant in 2023? A design from over a century ago? John Moses Browning came up with this design, like I said, over 100 years ago. And it is still relevant today. Despite owning modern polymer framed striker fired guns, this is still my favorite handgun to shoot. And I went this last week to go pick up my first 2011 double stack 1911, actually a Springfield Prodigy. Unfortunately, they didn't have the 4 1/4 inch in stock, and I'm probably going to have to wait a couple weeks to get it. But I will be getting that gun. And it made me think it was time to revisit the 1911. If you guys have followed along and you've seen about this specific Springfield Ronin, you know that I had some problems with it at the very beginning. Well, no longer. The thing is running great now. And I just wanted to talk about 1911s in general because I believe that they have a certain amount of soul to them and personality that polymer frame pistols just don't have. Before we get into 1911s, make sure you subscribe to Sawtooth Tactical, hit that bell notification, and let's talk about the 1911. So the 1911, besides just being the most aesthetically pleasing handgun, in my opinion, that there is, the ergonomics on it just plain work. It's just a fun gun to shoot. So the 1911 is America's pistol. It's been around, like I mentioned, for over a century. It was in 2 world wars, and it was on the winning side in both of those wars. Now, 1911 guys will say that this gun won 2 world wars. I don't know if I would go that far, but this was the sidearm of the winning side in both those wars. This gun represents America, the United States. It is, in my opinion, more than just a handgun. Like this M&P or this Glock build, the PSA dagger here. While these are cool, they're tactical, they work great, they're fantastic tools that serve their purpose very well. The 1911 is more like mechanical art. It is when you think of a pistol and the lines, the shape, what a good looking pistol should look like, this is it. It's the 1911. That is the classic shape of a handgun when most people think of one. When I first got into firearms, I knew that I needed to get a 1911. And I did very early on. Now I don't still have that original 1911. I've gone through a few since then. But I have always since then owned at least one 1911. And I can't see myself not owning a 1911. Even once I pick up this double stack Springfield Prodigy, I will still continue to own this Springfield Ronin 1911 because there is just something about the 1911. When you pick it up and you put it on target, it just feels better than most other guns. The grip angle of the 1911, the ergonomics, the aesthetics, just the forged steel instead of something like a plastic gun, it just feels more real. I get a similar feeling shooting my AK here. There's something about these historical guns that it's more than just a tool. say you have two watches. You have a Casio electronic watch, digital watch. Well, it'll tell time just fine. Just like this Glock build will put a bullet down range just fine, and it'll be accurate. It'll get the job done. But a Rolex, a fine Swiss handmade watch, well, to me, that's like what a 1911 is. It just has personality built into it. It is, in my opinion, mechanical perfection when it comes to firearms. Now, when you rack the slide on like a Glock or something, the way it feels is the way it feels. When you do that on a 1911, it just feels right. It's so smooth. The machining between the slide and the frame and the lockup of the barrel is something, it takes hand fitting to get it right. And while this is a production gun, it's a very good production gun. And I'm extremely happy with this Springfield Ronin. I did have some problems with it when I first got it, some reliability issues. What I think it came down to, though, was a break-in period. And I've been so used to guns like these that, were perfectly reliable from the very first round up until now. I was disappointed with the unreliability of this when I first got it. Well, as you'll see from this video, I put a bunch of rounds through it today and not a single hiccup. And in fact, I haven't had an issue with it for a long time now. This thing runs absolutely perfectly. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. But it did take a little breaking in, and that's because tolerances on something like this are a lot tighter than they are on something like this. If you remember, the Postal Service lost this slide to my M&P when I sent it off to get milled, and I had to order a new slide for it. Well, the new slide came, and it worked perfectly on the gun because these are mass produced. They're built to have the parts just work together, no matter which parts they are, as long as they're the correct parts. And it did. And this isn't the original slide that came on the gun, but it works great because the tolerances are just not that tight on a gun like that. Well, on this, if you take this apart, the gunsmith's initials are actually engraved into the slide, the frame. Can't remember if it's on the barrel. Yeah, on the underside of the barrel. Because they actually pick slides, frames, and barrels that go together. And they're hand fit, even on a production gun like this. This gun right here is about a $800 1911. Now that is not even expensive when it comes to 1911s. But it's a lot more than like a Glock or an M&P cost from the factory or from your local gun store. And that's just for a kind of a mid-range 1911. And the reason for that is, well, materials and craftsmanship. You have to, this is made out of a lot more steel than something like this is. And it has to be fitted together in a way that's going to work, where you're going to get that barrel lockup, which gives you your accuracy. You're going to get that perfect, crisp 1911 trigger, and you're going to get that slide to frame feel with no wobble, nothing at all. It's just tight. Let's take a look at this gun up close, and then we're going to talk about some of the things that I just love about shooting the 1911. But first, you got to look at it up close because it is just a beautiful gun. So I felt like it was time to do like a recap on the Springfield Ronin. If you guys remember, my first video with this gun, it actually didn't work very well. But apparently it just needed a break-in period and a bit of polishing, because the thing seems to be working great now. Reliable as ever. So here is my current 1911. This is my favorite 1911 that I've owned so far, and it's actually chambered in 9mm, which I know, blasphemy, right? Well, one thing about 9mm that's nice is you actually get 9 or 10 rounds in the magazine. With these Wilson Combat Vickers Tactical magazines, I get 10 rounds. With the OEM mag that came with it, I get 9. And compared to 7 or 8 rounds that you get with 45 ACP, it is nice to have that extra capacity. Now that's also the reason that I'm going to buy the Springfield Prodigy next week as soon as they get one in. With those, you get 17 or 20 rounds in the magazine. But those 2011 style double-seg 1911 guns, they have a polymer grip. They have a steel frame and slide, steel barrel obviously, polymer grip instead of the full steel frame as a 1911. And so in my opinion, there's just a little bit less soul and personality there. Now I think it's going to be an amazing gun, and I can't wait to get it and shoot it. But today, we're talking about the 1911. Now this one I have switched out the grips on. These are some G10 grips from Lock Grips. It used to have wooden grips on it. And the blued slide, stainless steel frame, and the wood grips were a really, really classic look. But I gotta admit, I love these G10 grips on it too. Makes it just a little bit more modern and a little bit more tactical. Now you do have a polymer trigger shoe on the Springfield Ronin, and I've got no problem with that. It's skeletonized along with the skeletonized combat hammer, and this trigger pull is absolutely amazing. If you see that just little bit of take up and a very crisp break, your reset is short, and it's just an amazing trigger. And that is one of the biggest draws of the 1911. To this day, more than 100 years after its, design, this still has a better trigger than any other handgun on the market. And a really high-end 1911 will have an even better trigger than this does. But I gotta tell you, I am not complaining. Now with this Ronin, this is the thing about modern 1911s. They take all of the perfectly beautiful things of the original 1911, but they're just updated a little bit. Like the memory bump on your grip safety and the beaver tail, which, keeps you from getting any kind of slide bite on your hand. And it also just looks great. But that way you can get a nice high grip in the gun. And with your extended safety here, you can put your thumb on top of that and use it as a gas pedal to control recoil. But I gotta admit, a full-size 5-inch 1911 like this, chambered in 9mm, the recoil is negligible. This gun is so easy to shoot accurately and so easy to shoot quickly. A lot of people think 1911s should only be chambered in 45 ACP, but ever since getting one in 9mm, God, it just is a pleasurable gun to shoot. And it's also just a pleasurable gun to manipulate in general. You've got the slide serrations on the rear and the front on a gun like this, and you can see how easy and smooth that slide is on the frame. Part of that is due to it being chambered in 9mm. It has a much lighter recoil spring in it, so you can just rack the slide so easily. But part of it is just the design of the 1911. It is just a smooth gun. When they are built right, everything just fits together absolutely perfectly. Now the sights on this obviously are also upgraded from the original 1911. You've got a fiber optic front sight with a 2-dot rear sight that's like a tactical rack ledge. So you can see how easy it is to rack that slide. One finger on it and I can rack it just from that rear sight. And besides that, it's just a beautiful gun. And it's hard to say that about most modern guns. This gun, while it is very cool and I love it, it just doesn't have the class, the personality, the beauty of something like this. If this is a Honda Civic, well, this is a 67 Mustang Fastback. This is like your Shelby. So one of my favorite things about the 1911 platform is just how accurate it really is. For a handgun, especially a 9mm 1911 like this, you can shoot it accurate and fast very easily. Bullseye. So when I said that the 1911 is like a classic muscle car, I did mean it. And maybe that's part of the reason that I love 1911s so much and feel such an attraction to them compared to other firearms. My very first car was a 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback. I really wish I still had that car. I worked very hard for it when I was 15 years old, and I absolutely loved that car. Rebuilt the engine with the help of a friend of mine that was a mechanic, and there was just something about the feel